Have you ever thought about what it would take to just vanish? I don't mean disappearing from social media for a weekend. I mean stepping out of a commercial airplane at 10,000 feet into a raging storm with a bag full of cash and never being seen again. It sounds like the opening scene of a blockbuster movie, right? But this really happened. This is the story of the man the world came to know as D.B. Cooper. Our story begins on November 24, 1971, the day before Thanksgiving. A man who bought his ticket under the name Don Cooper boarded Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305 in Portland, Oregon. He was in his mid-40s, dressed in a dark business suit with a black tie and a white shirt. He looked like any other businessman on his way home for the holiday. He sat down, ordered a bourbon and soda, and seemed perfectly calm. But inside the briefcase, resting on his lap, was something that would change air travel forever. Shortly after takeoff, Cooper handed a note to a flight attendant. Thinking it was just another business traveler's phone number, she initially slipped it into her pocket. Cooper leaned in and said, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a device." The note was polite but firm. It stated he had an explosive device in his briefcase, and his demands were simple: $200,000 in unmarked $20 bills, for parachutes to primary and to reserve, and a fuel truck ready in Seattle to refuel the plane upon landing. He was calm, articulate, and almost courteous. The flight attendant alerted the captain, who then contacted air traffic control. The airline's president, wanting to avoid any harm to the passengers, authorized full cooperation. For the next 2 hours, as the plane circled Puget Sound, the passengers had no idea they were part of one of the most audacious heists in American history. They just thought the plane was delayed due to mechanical issues. On the ground, a frantic scramble was underway. The FBI and local police worked to gather the cash and the parachutes. They photographed every single one of the 10,000 bills, hoping to track them later. Once the plane landed in Seattle, the exchange went exactly as Cooper had planned. The 36 passengers were released in exchange for the money and the parachutes, delivered by a single airline employee. Cooper had the crew refuel the plane. He then outlined his new flight plan, a course to Mexico City, flying at a low altitude of 10,000 feet, with the landing gear down and the wing flaps at 15 degrees slow and low, perfect conditions for a jump. The pilots explained that at that speed and altitude, they wouldn't have enough fuel to make it to Mexico City. They agreed on a refueling stop in Reno, Nevada. Sometime after 8 p.m., Flight 35 was back in the air, with only Cooper and the essential flight crew on board. The night was pitch black, whipped by wind and freezing rain. As they flew south, a warning light flickered in the cockpit, indicating that the aft air stair, the staircase at the back of the Boeing 727, had been opened. This was it, the moment of truth. The crew radioed Cooper over the intercom, but there was no answer. He was gone. Somewhere between Seattle and Reno, in the treacherous, stormy darkness over the rugged wilderness of southwestern Washington state, Dan Cooper had jumped from the back of the plane with the ransom money strapped to his body. He stepped out of that aircraft and into legend. When the plane landed safely in Reno, it was surrounded by law enforcement. A thorough search of the cabin confirmed what they already suspected. Cooper was no longer on board. He had left behind his black clip-on tie, a tie clasp, and 8 cigarette butts. What followed was one of the most extensive and expensive manhunts in U.S. history. The FBI, along with the military, scoured the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest. They sent out search parties on foot, used helicopters, and even a submarine to check a local lake, but they found nothing. Not a parachute, not a briefcase, not a single $20 bill. The terrain was incredibly difficult, and the weather conditions at the time of the jump were severe. It was as if the forest had simply swallowed him whole. For years, the case went cold. The FBI investigated over 1,000 persons of interest, but could never definitively name a suspect. The D.B. Cooper moniker, by the way, was actually a media mistake. An early person of interest was a man named D.B. Cooper who was quickly cleared, but the name stuck in the public imagination, becoming more famous than the Dan Cooper on the plane ticket. The mystery deepened, and the legend grew. Was he an experienced paratrooper, a disgruntled veteran, or just an ordinary man who pulled off an extraordinary feat? Then, in February 1980, nearly 9 years after the event, a major breakthrough occurred. A young boy named Brian Ingram was vacationing with his family along the banks of the Columbia River, near a place called Tennebar. While digging in the sand, he unearthed 3 bundles of cash. The money was decomposed and bundled with rubber bands. When his family turned it over to the FBI, they made a stunning discovery. The serial numbers on the bills matched the ransom money given to D.B. Cooper. This was the first, and to this day, the only verifiable physical evidence from the event ever found in the wild. But this discovery raised more questions than it answered. Only about $5,800 was found. What happened to the other $194,200? And how did this small portion of the money get buried on a sandbar, miles away from the projected flight path and jump zone? Experts suggested it might have been dredged from the bottom of the river and deposited on the bank. Did this mean Cooper lost some of the money during the jump, or did he intentionally bury it there? And most importantly, did this discovery imply he didn't survive the landing? If he had perished, where was the rest of the money, the parachute, or any other sign of him? The forest remained silent. Over the decades, the investigation has focused on a handful of key suspects. One of the most compelling was Richard McCoy Jr., a Vietnam veteran and experienced skydiver who staged a similar copycat hijacking just a few months after Cooper's. He jumped from a Boeing 727 with $500,000, but he was caught and later met his end during a prison escape. While the methods were similar, the FBI officially ruled him out due to mismatches in physical descriptions. Another prominent name is Dwayne Weber, a World War II veteran who, on his deathbed, reportedly confessed to his wife, "I am Dan Cooper." His wife recalled him having a recurring nightmare about leaving his fingerprints on the plane. After his passing, she connected the dots to a knee injury he claimed was from jumping out of a plane and an old plane ticket he had for a flight to Seattle around that time. The FBI investigated, but a DNA comparison with the partial DNA profile recovered from Cooper's tie was not a match. Then there's the theory that Cooper was actually a woman named Barbara Dayton, a skilled pilot and paratrooper who had undergone gender confirmation surgery. Her friends claimed she confessed to them, but again, there was no hard evidence to support the claim. Dozens of others have been suggested, from disgruntled airline employees to career criminals, but each lead eventually hit a dead end. So, what is the ultimate fate of D.B. Cooper? The FBI officially closed the active investigation in 2016, concluding that the resources could be better used on other cases. The prevailing theory among many investigators is that Cooper likely did not survive the jump. He jumped into a freezing, high-wind storm at night over some of the most unforgiving terrain in North America. He was wearing a business suit, not proper gear for such an extreme jump. The parachutes he was given were not state-of-the-art, and it's uncertain if he even knew how to operate them properly. It's highly probable that he perished on impact or died of exposure shortly after landing. The discovery of the money on the riverbank could support this, suggesting it washed downstream from wherever he and the rest of the cash landed. But the romantic in all of us loves another possibility. The theory that he not only survived, but succeeded. That this cool, calm, and collected man had planned every detail, knew the area, had an accomplice waiting on the ground, and simply walked away with the money to start a new life. He became a folk hero, a symbol of defiance against the system, an ordinary man who beat the odds and pulled off the perfect crime. He's the guy who stuck it to the man and got away with it. This is why the story endures. It's a mystery that allows for endless speculation. The legacy of D.B. Cooper is undeniable. His actions led to significant changes in airline security. Cockpit doors were reinforced, and a new device, a spring-loaded vane, called the Cooper vane, was installed on all Boeing 727s to prevent the aft air stair from being opened in flight. He single-handedly changed the way we fly. Today, the case remains the only unsolved act of air piracy in American history. It's a tantalizing puzzle with a missing final piece. Did D.B. Cooper fall to his demise in the dark woods of Washington, a footnote in a failed heist? Or did he successfully escape, living out his days quietly, perhaps smiling every time he saw his own story on the news? We may never know for sure. And maybe, just maybe, that's the way it's supposed to be. The man known as Dan Cooper didn't just steal $200,000. He stole a piece of history and left us with a mystery for the ages. What do you think happened to him? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this journey into the unknown, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into history's greatest mysteries. See you next time.